Welcome back, comic lore lovers. Tonight, we explore a question that has haunted fans for decades. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story carry you away. Imagine a stillness, not the quiet of a desolate place, but the profound, almost sacred hush of an operating theater, where lives are delicately balanced on the edge of a blade. The air is cool, sterile, a faint metallic tang lingering. In the heart of this precise universe stand hands of unparalleled skill. They glide, they steady, they incise with an artistry that borders on the divine. These are the hands of Dr. Stephen Strange. Unbroken, unmarred, no catastrophic accident ever stole their dexterity. No tremor ever threatened their perfect control. They are instruments of triumph, renowned across the globe for feats of neurosurgery others could only dream of. Every stitch is flawless, every separation of tissue a ballet of precision. Each successful procedure fuels an ego already burning bright, a quiet confidence that borders on unshakable arrogance. His touch, whether on a scalpel or a patient's brow post-op, is firm, assured, the touch of a man who commands his world, who shapes outcomes with elegant, scientific certainty. He moves through his days with an effortless grace, each movement a testament to his own unbroken mastery, a living monument to human potential, defined purely by what can be seen, touched, and meticulously repaired. He is the ultimate scientific rationalist, convinced that every mystery yields to intellect and technique, and his hands are the irrefutable proof. Beyond the hushed precision of the operating room, Strange's life unfolds with the same unwavering perfection. His penthouse apartment, perched atop a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, offers panoramic views of a city that never sleeps, a sprawling tapestry of electric lights and silent ambition. Here, he moves through rooms filled with art, rare books, and cutting-edge technology, each object a testament to his refined taste and substantial wealth. His suits are cut with surgical precision, his movements economical and purposeful. His world is one of elegant order, meticulously curated to reflect his own elevated standing. From this high vantage, the city below seems a predictable machine, its complexities solvable, its rhythms understood. He sips aged whiskey, the glass cool in his unblemished hand, his gaze sweeping over the urban sprawl. He sees only what science has built, what human ingenuity has achieved. The flickering streetlights, the distant sirens, these are mere data points in a world governed by cause and effect. He rarely pauses to consider the faint, almost imperceptible shimmers that sometimes dance at the periphery of vision, perhaps a trick of the light, or the subtle hum of something ancient beneath the urban din. such anomalies are quickly filed away as irrelevant, dismissed by a mind finely tuned to logic, incapable of acknowledging the threads of existence that weave beyond the tangible. His grip on reality is absolute, scientific, and utterly blind to the whispers of a world far older and stranger than his own. This unshakable conviction forms the bedrock of his existence. He is a man who scoffs politely at superstitious beliefs, dismisses folklore as quaint anachronisms, and regards any talk of magic as a quaint, misguided attempt to explain what science has yet to fully comprehend. His expansive library, though filled with profound medical and philosophical texts, holds no tomes of ancient mysticism. Such subjects are beneath his intellectual rigor. Occasionally, he might acquire an ornate antique, perhaps a beautifully carved box or a curiously adorned statuette, purely for its aesthetic value, placing it on a polished surface without a flicker of recognition for the faint, latent energy it might radiate. He might notice a slight, unexplainable chill in a warm room, or a momentary distortion in the reflection of a polished surface. But his mind, ever the scientist, immediately seeks a rational explanation. A draft, a flaw in the glass, anything but the impossible. His perfectly formed hands, so capable of mending the most delicate of biological systems, are utterly oblivious to the subtle pulses of otherworldly power that sometimes brush against his world. He remains an island of unwavering scientific certainty in an ocean that is slowly, imperceptibly, beginning to stir with forces he cannot measure, cannot dissect, and for which he has no cure. His fate, it seems, is to remain brilliantly, tragically unaware, his hands intact, but his mind closed to the true nature of the universe around him, a universe that will soon demand a reckoning. From the towering elegance of his penthouse, Stephen Strange descends into the meticulously ordered world of his hospital, a sanctuary of science and certainty. The hum of medical equipment, the hushed whispers of staff, the antiseptic scent of cleanliness, these were the symphonies of his domain. His pristine white coat, tailored as sharply as his expensive suits, glided through the corridors, a testament to his untouchable status. Unlike the shifting shadows of the city outside, the hospital offered only facts, diagnoses, and treatments. Every patient was a puzzle to be solved, every illness a challenge to be overcome by the sheer force of human intellect and surgical skill. His hands, still perfect, still unblemished, were instruments of near-divine precision, capable of feats that earned him awe and envy. One crisp autumn morning, a new patient arrived, unlike any Strange had encountered before. A young girl, no older than 7, lay in a private room, her small body racked by an ailment that defied diagnosis. Her name was Lily. Her skin, usually vibrant, was now marked by faint, ethereal patterns, like frost on a windowpane, that seemed to shift and glow with an internal, almost imperceptible light. Her eyes, normally bright, held a distant, unfocused quality, as if she were seeing worlds beyond the sterile walls of her room. Standard tests revealed nothing. Strange stood by Lily's bedside, his perfectly gloved hands hovering, not in preparation for surgery, but in bewildered contemplation. His mind, usually a swift torrent of diagnostic possibilities, felt strangely still, almost hesitant. He ordered every conceivable test again, pushing the hospital's cutting-edge technology to its limits. But the results remained maddeningly normal. The faint patterns on Lily's skin pulsed almost imperceptibly, catching the light in a way that defied explanation, like light shimmering on disturbed water. He leaned closer, his brow furrowed, straining to detect any rational origin for the child's distress. He saw the almost invisible trembles that ran through her small frame, the subtle way her breath hitched, not in pain, but in what seemed like an effort to remain anchored. Dr. Strange stood over Lily's bed, his gloved hands moving with a practiced grace that was almost hypnotic. He meticulously examined every inch of her skin, tracing the faint, shifting patterns that pulsed with an almost imperceptible light. His gaze, usually sharp with diagnostic certainty, was now clouded with a nascent bewilderment. He ordered an exhaustive battery of tests, pushing the limits of the hospital's advanced diagnostic imaging and genetic sequencing. Every scan, every sample, every data point was scrutinized under his unblinking scientific eye, searching for the logical explanation, the tangible cause. Days bled into nights as the diagnostic machines churned out reams of data, each report returning an agonizingly normal result. Lily's vital signs were stable, her cellular structure unremarkable, her genetic code pristine. Yet the subtle patterns on her skin persisted, sometimes growing a fraction brighter, sometimes seeming to retract into the very depths of her small body, only to re-emerge elsewhere. Strange consulted with specialists from around the globe, sharing the sanitized clinical data, omitting the unsettling visual phenomena, hoping for a remote diagnosis. Each expert offered theories ranging from rare autoimmune conditions to obscure viral infections, but none fit. A quiet frustration began to brew beneath Strange's polished exterior, a tiny crack in the edifice of his absolute scientific certainty, as the logical world offered no answers for the impossible child before him. The hospital room itself began to subtly alter in Lily's presence. Light from the windows seemed to bend ever so slightly as it entered, casting peculiar, elongated shadows, even when the sun was directly overhead. Flowers brought by nurses wilted prematurely, their vibrant colors fading to a muted gray within hours. Sensitive electronic devices, particularly those brought close to Lily's bed, occasionally flickered or displayed momentary static, only to return to normal when moved away. Stephen, initially dismissing these as unrelated anomalies or faulty equipment, found himself increasingly logging them. A quiet, insistent hum of doubt beginning to resonate within his logical mind. He would catch himself watching the faint distortion of light, a flicker in his peripheral vision that defied explanation. A new layer of the unquantifiable manifesting around his most baffling patient, the weight of the inexplicable pressed down on Strange. A subtle tremor beneath the polished facade of his scientific confidence. He made the decision to transfer Lily to a secluded wing of the hospital, a specially outfitted observation suite designed for cases requiring absolute isolation and the most rigorous monitoring. Here, away from the clamor of the main wards, he could dedicate himself more fully to her enigma, hoping that proximity and an even finer granularity of data would unveil the hidden mechanisms at play. The sterile silence of the new room was broken only by the soft hum of life support and diagnostic equipment, each machine a testament to his unwavering, if now somewhat strained, faith in empirical truth within the controlled environment. The subtle patterns on Lily's skin began to exhibit a new, more dynamic quality. They no longer merely shifted, they seemed to respond. Sometimes, when Strange leaned closer, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. A faint, almost imperceptible brightening would ripple across a particular segment, like disturbed water. Other times, a gentle, sustained touch of his gloved hand on her forehead would cause the glowing tendrils to retract, as if shy, only to slowly re-emerge moments later. A whisper of unseen energy reacting to his presence, defying all known physiological reflexes or cellular behaviors. This quiet, almost intimate dance between observer and observed further deepened the unsettling mystery. The mounting pile of normal diagnostic reports lay untouched on Strange's desk, a stark counterpoint to the growing stack of more arcane tomes he had reluctantly begun to consult. Old medical journals on forgotten diseases, historical accounts of inexplicable ailments, even anthropology texts detailing ancient beliefs in spirit sickness or cosmic influence, now occupied his evenings. He approached them with a surgeon's cold, analytical eye, searching for any tangential reference, any forgotten correlation, anything that might bridge the impossible gap between Lily's ethereal condition and the solid, predictable world he had always known. The heavy silence of his private study, usually filled with the murmur of his own thoughts on scientific triumph, now contained a quiet, almost imperceptible hum of intellectual struggle, a grudging acknowledgement that the boundaries of his universe might be expanding. The sterile environment of Lily's secluded observation suite, a testament to cutting-edge medical science, became an extension of Strange's own mind, a meticulously controlled laboratory where every variable was scrutinized, every anomaly logged with an almost obsessive precision. He had commissioned a new generation of specialized sensor arrays, delicate instruments designed to map subatomic fluctuations, to detect subtle energy fields, anything that might correlate with Lily's shifting epidermal luminescence. Wires as fine as spider silk connected to microscopic probes, gently adhering to her skin, while holographic projections danced above her bed, depicting real-time readouts of cellular activity and theoretical quantum interactions. Days blurred into nights. The rhythmic, almost hypnotic hum of his advanced equipment, a constant counterpoint to his ceaseless pursuit of empirical data. He consumed scientific papers like a man starved, cross-referencing disciplines, pushing the boundaries of known medical and physical sciences. Yet, the more refined his measurements, the more exhaustive his analysis, the more elusive the underlying mechanism remained. His relentless scientific inquiry, now verging on an all-consuming obsession, led him down increasingly obscure paths within the realm of theoretical physics and esoteric biology. He delved into the farthest reaches of quantum entanglement, into bioluminescent phenomena previously considered impossible in human physiology, even into speculative theories on emergent consciousness at a cellular level, attempting to find any precedent, any shred of scientific literature that could contextualize Lily's condition. His office, typically a bastion of clean, ordered rationality, where every book was indexed and every paper filed, began to acquire towering, precarious stacks of unusual research papers and obscure tomes. Some bore titles that would have once provoked an amused scoff, hinting at ancient alchemical texts or philosophical treatises on the nature of reality. He spent hours poring over old manuscripts digitized from forgotten libraries, his gaze tracing cryptic diagrams that seemed more art than science, though still firmly anchored in the scientific method, rejecting any overt supernatural claims. The sheer depth of the unknown began to exert a subtle, almost imperceptible pressure on the rigid confines of his established worldview. One evening, amidst his esoteric research, a faded, almost forgotten article tucked within a historical medical journal caught his eye. It detailed strange occurrences in a remote Transylvanian village centuries ago, referencing auric emanations and spirit lights associated with illnesses that defied conventional cures, often leading to rapid decline, or just as inexplicably miraculous recovery, dismissing it initially as nothing more than pre-scientific superstition, a relic of an unenlightened age. Strange, nevertheless, found himself drawn, almost against his will, to seek out the modern-day counterpart to such tales. His journey led him far from the polished, aseptic corridors of his hospital into a less traveled part of the city, a district of crooked cobblestone streets and buildings that leaned into each other with age. He eventually found himself standing before a small, dusty curio shop, its windows filled with peculiar trinkets, polished stones, intricately carved wooden figures, and aged, tarnished silver amulets. The air within was thick with the scent of old wood, something vaguely herbal, and an almost imperceptible undercurrent of ozone, like the air after a distant lightning strike. The quiet hum of Stephen's bespoke diagnostics lab, usually a symphony of precise data, began to falter, interrupted by erratic energy spikes. Lily's projections, once elegant and contained, occasionally pulsed with an inexplicable violet light, briefly distorting the air around them. Other patients, initially presenting with similar but milder, unidentifiable neurological issues, showed accelerated, baffling symptoms, their cellular structures displaying patterns unknown to medical science, sometimes even resisting conventional treatments entirely. Stephen, driven deeper into his research, ordered increasingly esoteric scans, his gaze tracing cryptic energy signatures that seemed to bloom from within the very fabric of the hospital itself, defying all known physics. He spent nights, fueled by caffeine and an unyielding will, trying to isolate the source, convinced there was a scientific explanation just beyond his current grasp. Even as his instruments struggled to even register the anomalies, his search for a rational explanation led him beyond the hospital's sterile walls, guided by faint, almost subliminal energy readings that his modified instruments occasionally picked up. One evening, an unusually strong spike directed him to the city's forgotten corners, to an abandoned, overgrown brownstone tucked away behind a bustling market. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange, cloying scent. Inside, dust motes danced in the sparse light, filtering through grimy windows, revealing archaic symbols crudely painted on crumbling plaster walls, and a makeshift altar of dark, polished stones, a single, intricately carved wooden box, pulsating with the same violet energy he'd observed in his lab, rested upon it. He approached cautiously, his scientific mind warring with an unfamiliar sense of dread, convinced this was some elaborate, primitive hoax, yet unable to dismiss the palpable presence of something profoundly unnatural. As he reached for the box, a low, guttural chanting echoed from deeper within the forgotten house, followed by the soft rustle of movement. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in dark, heavy robes, their face obscured by a deep hood. Their hands, gnarled and ancient, began to trace intricate patterns in the air, causing the very light to bend around their movements. Stephen's vision blurred at the edges, the world shimmering with impossible colors. As the air grew heavy and cold, the cloaked figure raised their hands, and the wooden box on the altar pulsed brighter. A raw, uncontrolled violet energy erupting from it, causing the dust on the floor to swirl into miniature cyclones. He stumbled back, his scientific instruments chattering wildly, their sensors overloaded by an energy signature that was not merely anomalous, but actively hostile, undeniably defying every law of physics he had ever known. Stephen's gloved fingertips hovered inches above the intricately carved box. The violet light, once a mere pulse, now thrummed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, like a sleeping heart stirring to life. Dust motes caught in the faint, unseen currents around the artifact danced with an unnatural grace, forming tiny, ephemeral eddies. His gaze, sharp and analytical, traced the worn patterns on the wood, searching for a seam, a hinge, any rational point of entry or explanation for the palpable energy radiating from within. The cloying scent in the air seemed to thicken, hinting at something ancient and profoundly unscientific, challenging the very bedrock of his understanding. A shiver, not of cold, but of profound otherness, prickled at the base of his neck, a sensation he rigorously ignored. As Stephen's hands, still unwavering, edged closer, the violet light deepened, seeping into the very grains of the wood. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated, not in the air, but seemingly from within the bones of the old brownstone itself. A low, resonant chord that vibrated beneath his feet. The symbols on the crumbling plaster walls, previously dormant and crude, now seemed to possess a subtle, inner luminescence, a faint, barely there glow that made their ancient forms ripple in the dimness. The carved box, as if responding to an unseen touch, began to subtly shift, its intricate lid rising with a slow, deliberate grace, revealing not a mechanism, but an infinite, swirling wellspring of pure, silent violet light. The sudden, silent bloom of light from the box cast long, dancing shadows across the decaying room. It was in this altered light that a presence made itself known. From the deepest shadows of a recessed doorway, a figure emerged, not with a sudden movement, but a quiet, almost hesitant step. They were cloaked in practical, unassuming fabric, a stark contrast to Stephen's pristine surgical attire. Their face, partially obscured by the cowl, held a quiet solemnity, eyes fixed not on Stephen, but on the throbbing violet heart of the box. They carried no grand staff or gleaming amulet, only a quiet, weary resolve, an observer who had perhaps expected this moment, yet wished it hadn't come. This was not a hero, but a sentinel, burdened by a purpose Stephen was only beginning to glimpse. The violet light, now unleashed from its ancient confines, pulsed gently, its soft glow casting long, shifting shadows across Stephen's features. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but rather possessed a hypnotic depth, drawing his gaze into its infinite swirl. The air itself seemed to grow heavy, imbued with an ethereal weight. Yet it carried no scent of ozone or chemical reaction that his scientific mind could categorize. His gloved hands, still poised, felt a strange, tingling warmth emanating from the vortex, a sensation utterly alien to any surgical instrument or laboratory experiment he had ever encountered. The rhythmic hum from the building deepened, becoming a resonant, almost melodic drone that filled the space, vibrating through the old floorboards and up into his very bones. A profound, unscientific symphony. He felt a profound shift in his understanding, an uneasy tremor beneath the bedrock of his rational world, as if the very laws of physics were bending to accommodate this impossible display. From the heart of the swirling light, delicate, translucent tendrils began to unfurl, like silent, blooming petals of pure energy. They extended slowly, gracefully, not reaching out with aggression, but rather exploring the space with an almost gentle curiosity. One tendril, impossibly fine, drifted towards a nearby crumbling plaster wall, where the ancient symbols were now glowing with a more pronounced, subtle luminescence. As it touched the wall, the symbols there seemed to pulse in response, their inner light flaring softly before settling into a steady, connected glow. The dust, motes in the air, previously dancing, now coalesced around these energy tendrils, forming faint, shimmering patterns that slowly drifted and reformed, as if guided by an unseen current, painting ephemeral, silent frescoes on the air itself. Then a change subtle as a whispered thought, yet profound in its implication, settled over the room. The violet light, which had been drawing Stephen's focus, now now seemed to ripple, distorting the very air around it. The familiar lines of the dusty shelves and the peeling wallpaper at the edges of his vision wavered, as if viewed through heat haze, but without any discernible heat. The low, rhythmic hum intensified slightly, resonating with a deeper, more complex chord, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, becoming almost impossibly dense, like velvet folds of pure night. It was as if the space itself was breathing, expanding and contracting with an imperceptible pulse, subtly altering its dimensions and challenging Stephen's innate sense of spatial reality, a sensation that jarred his surgically precise mind more than any direct threat. The delicate tendrils, having explored the air, now descended with purpose, gently tracing the crumbling plaster of the wall. With each touch, faint lines shimmered into view, revealing ancient, faded glyphs and intricate patterns hidden beneath layers of dust and time. It was as if the wall itself was a forgotten parchment, now slowly illuminated by an invisible hand, detailing a language and a history far older than any human record. Stephen felt a cold, analytical dread mingle with a nascent wonder, a tremor that resonated deeper than mere scientific curiosity. The newly revealed glyphs began to pulse with a synchronized, rhythmic glow, casting elongated, unsteady shadows across the uneven floorboards. These shadows writhed and stretched, briefly coalescing into unsettling, abstract forms that dissolved as quickly as they appeared, hinting at a reality just beyond perception. A soft, pervasive hum emanated from the very stone, a frequency entirely new to Stephen's keenly trained ears, causing the dust motes to shimmer in accelerated, almost frenetic patterns around the now deeply etched symbols. As Stephen's gaze was fixed on the vibrating symbols, a subtle shift in the deeper shadows of the room caught his peripheral vision. A figure, cloaked in heavy, dark fabric, stepped silently into a sliver of the amber light, their silhouette sharp against the gloom. Their presence was not sudden, but rather a quiet unveiling, as if they had always been there, a silent observer waiting for this precise moment of the impossible. Their calm eyes now meeting his, holding a profound, unspoken understanding. The rhythmic pulsing of the glyphs intensified, creating a subtle heat that radiated into the cavernous space. Stephen, still rooted, felt a strange, almost magnetic pull from the ancient stone. The shimmering dust motes, now fully entwined with the spectral tendrils, began to coalesce into more defined, ephemeral shapes, swirling around the glowing symbols, as if drawn into a silent, cosmic dance. These shapes, transient and dreamlike, seemed to hint at forgotten constellations and distant, ethereal realms, their intricate forms slowly unfolding and dissolving in the air as the spectral forms danced. A single point of light, impossibly bright, yet not harsh, bloomed at the center of the largest, most intricately carved glyph. From this nascent lumina, a faint, almost imperceptible image began to unfold within the swirling dust and energy. A vision, like a memory glimpsed through frosted glass. It showed not a place, but a concept. A pair of hands, strong and unerring, performing delicate, impossible feats, not with a scalpel, but with threads of pure emerald light. The vision was fleeting, yet carried with it an immense sense of potential. A path untaken. Stephen felt an unbidden chill, a prickle along his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The image of the hands, so familiar yet alien in their magical dexterity, seemed to resonate deep within him, stirring a latent recognition. The humming frequency from the stone shifted, becoming a silent, internal echo in his mind, carrying with it a profound, sorrowful awareness. It was not a voice, but a knowing, a direct, undeniable communication of an existence that almost was, a burden he had been destined to bear, now subtly redirected, a path unwalked. The visions faded, leaving behind a profound sense of loss, a weight pressing down on his unbroken hands. Brilliant emerald light, born from the heart of the largest glyph, receded as gently as it had appeared, leaving behind only the faintest afterglow on the ancient stones. Stephen remained motionless, his breath held, the vivid, impossible vision of hands weaving pure light still imprinted on his mind's eye. A profound silence settled once more, broken only by the distant, soft drip of water echoing through the cavern. His logical mind, a lifetime trained in the precise, quantifiable world of neurosurgery, immediately sought to categorize and dismiss it, a hallucination, an atmospheric anomaly, an optical trick, yet a nascent wonder, colder and more persistent than any scientific curiosity, began to unfurl within him, chilling him to his core. The certainty of his world, once absolute, now felt subtly, unsettlingly askew, driven by an instinct he couldn't quite name. Stephen took a slow step forward, his polished dress shoes making no sound on the uneven floor. He extended a hand, his fingers, famous for their unwavering precision, brushing lightly against the cold, unyielding surface of the largest glyph. The stone, still radiating a faint, almost imperceptible warmth, offered no further visual spectacle. His surgeon's mind, accustomed to unraveling the most complex anatomical puzzles, meticulously traced the impossibly intricate patterns etched into the rock. There was no seam, no illusion, no detectable mechanism that that could explain the luminous display. It was as solid and undeniable as a bone, yet spoke of something entirely unscientific, a language his world had yet to learn. As his fingers retracted, the subtle warmth receded, but something new emerged from the ancient space. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the cavern floor, a deep resonance that vibrated through the soles of his shoes, up his legs, and into his very bones. It was not the violent shudder of an earthquake, but something far more fundamental, a harmonic thrum that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of existence. The air itself seemed to thicken, growing heavy with a silent, pervasive energy, no longer just cold cavern air, but a tangible, almost viscous presence. The earlier fleeting sense of other realms, of unseen dimensions brushing against his own, returned, not as a vision this time, but as a felt reality. His world, once so robustly defined by science, was beginning to feel porous, fragile at the edges. The cold touch of the glyph, now dull and inert, grounded Stephen back to his cavern. But the emerald light, the impossible weaving, it had etched itself deeper than any memory, into the very bedrock of his being. He stood for a long time, the only sound the slow, deliberate beat of his own heart, now a little less frantic, a little more accepting. The air itself seemed to hum with a residual energy, an almost imperceptible vibration that resonated not with scientific instruments, but with something far older, far more profound. His hands, still surgeon precise, flexed open and closed, no longer just instruments of science, but now also antennae to a dimension previously unimaginable. The arrogance that had been his constant companion, a shield forged from intellect and achievement, began to fray at the edges, replaced by a quiet, unsettling humility. He wasn't broken, not in the way fate had intended for another version of himself, but he was undeniably changed. The world, once a meticulous arrangement of atoms and observable forces, had revealed a hidden tapestry, vibrant and dangerous, woven with threads of pure emerald light he could only perceive, not yet manipulate. The path of the sorcerer supreme, the protector of the mystical realms, was not his to walk. He knew that now, with a clarity that surpassed logical deduction. Yet, a new path unfurled before him, one that demanded a different kind of mastery, a different kind of sight. He might not conjure shields of light or portals through space, but he could, perhaps, perceive the subtle tremors in the fabric of reality, the faint echoes of magic, where others saw only coincidence or madness. His precision, once applied solely to the delicate architecture of the human brain, could now be trained on the equally intricate, unseen structures of the cosmos. He would be an observer, a diagnostician of the impossible, using his unbroken mind to map the unmappable, his intact hands to steady the tremors in his own perception. The weight of this realization was not a burden, but a quiet, almost reverent purpose. He had not lost his hands, but he had gained eyes that could see beyond the veil. As Stephen slowly turned, the cavern's echoes seemed to soften, drawing the vastness into a more intimate space around him. His famous hands, still steady, still perfect, now held a different kind of power, the power of witness, of understanding, of a quiet, unyielding curiosity that had blossomed from the shock of the impossible. He had not been chosen by the mystic arts, but he had chosen a path of deep, discerning observation, a surgeon of reality's hidden layers. Back in the familiar, sterile glow of his operating theater, the meticulous movements of his instruments over human tissue would carry a new resonance. Each precise cut, each delicate suture would be performed not just with scientific certainty, but with an underlying awareness of the vast, intricate forces swirling just beyond perception. He understood that his strength lay not in wielding magic, but in comprehending its presence, in providing insight where others saw only chaos. The weight of the world's hidden dangers would not fall solely on his shoulders, but he would be a steadfast anchor in the storm, a mind capable of bridging the scientific and the ethereal. He found solace in this unique role, a quiet sense of fulfillment that the raw ambition of his past could never have provided. The restless drive that had once defined him mellowed into a profound calm, an inner quietude born from an expanded universe. He would continue to heal the physical body, but now with a silent, deeper understanding of the soul's intricate connection to the cosmos. And as the city lights twinkled beyond his penthouse window each night, he would often find himself gazing at the distant stars, not with the calculating gaze of a scientist, but with the quiet wonder of a man who had glimpsed magic without touching it, and found a different, yet equally vital, purpose in its gentle, shimmering wake. His hands, though never broken, had ultimately found a path to a different kind of healing, a quiet symphony of understanding in a world full of unseen marvels. Sleep, gentle listener, and perhaps in your dreams, you too might glimpse the silent dance between science and the unseen. Strange's penthouse office, once a temple to medical literature and surgical accolades, slowly began its subtle transformation. Charts on rare neurological conditions now shared space with ancient, leather-bound texts, their cryptic symbols a stark contrast to the sterile diagrams of the human brain, a specialized display usually reserved for intricate neural scans, now flickered with ethereal energy readings, patterns too complex for any known scientific instrument, yet perfectly legible to Strange's discerning eye. He moved with a quiet purpose, adjusting a holographic projection that depicted not an anatomical model, but the swirling energies of a nascent magical breach detected far across the city. This wasn't a place of power, but of meticulous analysis, a silent observatory where the unseen was made visible through his scientific lens. His hands, still steady and precise, manipulated a stylus over a screen, bridging the gap between quantum physics and mystical theory. Each calculated movement a testament to his unique path. One evening, a particularly perplexing anomaly arrived, not a patient, but a fragment of a minor dimension, stabilized just enough to be studied. It hummed with a low, disquieting frequency, a tear in reality contained within a lead-lined chamber in his newly repurposed sub-basement lab. Strange approached it not with fear, but with the detached curiosity of a surgeon examining an unusual tumor. He ran a series of non-invasive scans, his equipment custom-built and heavily shielded, designed to measure esoteric energies and vibrational signatures. The data streamed across his monitors, a vibrant kaleidoscope of unseen forces. His fingers, still adept at delicate manipulation, adjusted microscopic probes, his mind already formulating hypotheses, mapping the intricate interplay of forces that defied all conventional understanding. He saw it as a systemic breakdown, a wound in the fabric of existence that needed diagnosis before any treatment could even be considered. Later that week, a figure would arrive, cloaked and hesitant, led by a quiet summons. It was Sister Sarah, a minor practitioner from a forgotten order, her knowledge of rituals profound, but her understanding of interdimensional physics limited. Strange watched her from behind a glass partition as she attempted to reseal a tiny tear in the fragment, her ancient chants struggling against the raw, indifferent cosmic force. He didn't interrupt, but observed every tremor, every flicker of energy. Only when she faltered, her face pale with exhaustion, did he step forward. He presented her with a complex energy matrix he had devised, a subtle modification to her ritual, explaining the vibrational harmonics in terms she barely understood, but whose efficacy was undeniable. The spectral energies, once mere data points on his screens, had coalesced into a harrowing predictive model. Strange now understood the systemic breakdown, not as a localized wound, but as a cascading decay, an insidious unraveling originating from a single critical nexus. His lab, usually a sanctuary of precise measurement, became a tactical theater, holographic projections of interdimensional vectors swirling around him, each a silent testament to to an impending cosmic collapse. His scientific method, applied with relentless focus, had traced the very fault lines of reality, revealing a vulnerability no magical incantation could directly address. It was a problem of structural integrity, a cosmic engineering failure. The solution, elusive for even the most ancient mystic orders, lay not in grand spells, but in a series of delicate, vibrational counterfrequencies. Strange, with his steady hands and surgeon's insight, had devised a way to recalibrate the very resonance of the encroaching dimension. He moved to a custom-built console, its surface a mosaic of tactile controls and shimmering indicators. Each adjustment was a calculated touch. His fingers, once meticulously closing incisions, now precisely tuning the parameters of reality itself. A low, harmonic hum filled the chamber. A new kind of magic, born of physics and unwavering human intellect, designed to mend the tear not with force, but with intricate realignment. A ripple, almost imperceptible to the uninitiated, spread outwards from the lab. Not a violent shockwave, but a soothing wave of stabilization. The anomaly's disquieting hum softened, its jagged edges of reality smoothing over. A systemic balm applied to the wound of existence. Strange watched the intricate readouts, his brow furrowed not with stress, but with the focused intensity of a surgeon concluding a complex operation. The breach was not closed, for some cosmic wounds heal only gradually, but it was contained, its destructive potential neutralized. His hands, still resting lightly on the console, had not fought a battle of power, but orchestrated a symphony of cosmic repair, a quiet victory for precision over brute force. The low, harmonic hum in the chamber deepened, weaving through the air like a nascent symphony of cosmic mending. Stephen's hands, steady as a rock, moved with an almost ethereal precision over the console's controls. Each dial rotated with a soft, satisfying click, each button depressed, eliciting a faint, internal chime from the intricate machinery. His gaze, unblinking and intense, absorbed the ebb and flow of shimmering indicators that danced across the console's surface, reflecting the minute, yet monumental, shifts occurring within the dimensional fabric. He wasn't just adjusting frequencies. He was coaxing the very threads of existence back into alignment. A master weaver repairing a tear in an ancient tapestry. The air itself felt different, heavy with a new kind of pressure, yet strangely calm, as if the universe held its breath, witnessing this unprecedented act of scientific recalibration. As the calibrated resonance solidified, the chaotic swirl of interdimensional vectors projected around him began to subtly coalesce. Once a maelstrom of unpredictable lines and flashing points, The holographic display in his lab now showed the initial signs of a fragile, newfound order. Strange leaned back slightly, his eyes scanning the vast, swirling data. A flicker of professional satisfaction gracing his features. He noted the tightening of energy fields, the reduction in entropic decay rates, the very fabric of localized existence knitting itself back together in the wake of his vibrational counterfrequencies. It was a victory, undeniably, a testament to the power of human intellect applied with unwavering scientific rigor. Yet, even as the chamber's atmosphere settled into a stable, if still alien, equilibrium, his surgeon's mind, always seeking the hidden imperfection, the lurking variable, registered the sheer, overwhelming scale of the anomaly. He had closed a critical wound, yes, but the patient was still the entire universe, and its suffering was vast and ancient. As the overall stability deepened, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor manifested at the very edge of the most distant holographic projections. It was a single, discordant pixel in a field of calibrated harmony, a tiny ripple against a vast current of order. Strange's brow furrowed, his discerning gaze narrowing as he zoomed in mentally on the anomaly. His systems indicated near-perfect recalibration across the primary affected zones. Yet this minuscule fluctuation persisted, a ghost in the cosmic machine. It wasn't a flaw in his calculations, nor an error in his equipment. This was something external, an unknown variable that defied the elegant physics he had so painstakingly applied. After the initial triumph, a residual hum lingered in the recalibrated space, a faint, resonant frequency that vibrated just at the edge of his perception, resisting full scientific capture. It wasn't a flaw in his work, precisely, but an echo from the breach itself, a ghostly whisper of a reality fundamentally different from his own. His instruments, though showing stability, also registered minute, unquantifiable fluctuations, like distant heartbeats in a vast, silent void. A gnawing sense of something more began to settle in his usually unshakable mind. A tiny crack in the edifice of his absolute scientific certainty. The feeling pursued him beyond the confines of his high-tech laboratory, subtly coloring the edges of his perfectly ordered world. He found himself drawn to obscure archives, poring over forgotten scientific texts and esoteric theories, seeking a forgotten principle, a lost branch of physics that might explain the persistent wrongness. His fingers, still nimble and sure, traced forgotten diagrams, his keen intellect searching for a hidden equation among ancient symbols, a task far removed from the precision of a neurosurgeon's scalpel, yet approached with the same relentless rigor. Days melted into nights within the hushed silence of the archives. Yet no conventional scientific framework offered a comprehensive answer. Instead, buried deep within the most discredited margins and speculative footnotes, he found recurring symbols, often dismissed as superstition or artistic flourish. They appeared alongside descriptions of phenomena, strikingly similar to the subtle distortions. He now detected patterns woven into the very fabric of ancient mythologies and forgotten cults, not as science, but as stories. His brilliant mind, accustomed only to empirical truth, found itself grudgingly acknowledging a persistent, unyielding thread of the inexplicable. The pursuit of the unquantifiable led Stephen far from the polished, sterile corridors of his hospital. He now found himself deep within the labyrinthine stacks of ancient libraries, their air thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten dust. His nimble fingers, once meticulously navigating the delicate folds of human brain matter, now meticulously sifted through brittle pages, deciphering faded script and alien symbology. The precision of his surgeon's mind was still very much at work, but the anatomy he was studying was no longer flesh and blood, but a fragile tapestry of cryptic knowledge, a universe of whispered theories and unproven hypotheses that defied every peer-reviewed journal he had ever known. He sought a pattern, a hidden equation in the chaos, a scientific principle buried beneath centuries of mystique. His intellect refusing to surrender to the notion of the truly unexplainable. Among the countless forgotten texts, one particular tome began to assert itself. Its binding was unlike any other, neither leather nor vellum, but a smooth, cool material that seemed to drink the ambient light. Inside, the illustrations were less diagrams and more intricate, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and pulse faintly at the edge of his vision. He meticulously catalogued these visual anomalies, his mind searching for an optical illusion, a flaw in his perception, or perhaps a previously undiscovered form of natural luminescence. His fingers, still perfectly steady, traced the lines of an elaborate sigil, feeling a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration beneath the surface of the page. It was a sensation that transcended tactile input, a resonance that echoed the residual hum from the cosmic breach he had once sealed, a silent whisper confirming his growing suspicion. This was not merely lost science, but something else entirely, something fundamentally other. His perfectly steady fingers, once accustomed to the rhythmic beat of a living heart beneath a gloved palm, now sought a pulse within the inert binding. He delicately produced a set of miniature, highly sensitive sonic transducers from a finely crafted mahogany case. These were instruments designed to detect the faintest tremors in the cerebral cortex, now repurposed to map the subtle, almost imperceptible hum emanating from the strange tome, his brow furrowed in concentration, not in frustration, but in the focused pursuit of an anomaly. The numerical readouts on the small, holographic display flickered, displaying waveforms that defied conventional acoustical physics. A complex, layered resonance without a discernible source or medium. It was a silent symphony, playing only to the most advanced sensors, whispering of energies unknown. As the ambient light of the library dimmed, settling into the deep blue-black of approaching dawn, the book itself seemed to awaken. The intricate, swirling patterns that adorned its pages, previously only hints of movement at the periphery of his vision, now pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. The delicate lines of the sigil he had traced earlier began to glow with a muted amber light, a warm, almost comforting beacon in the cool, dusty air. It wasn't merely an optical effect, but a tangible emanation that warmed his fingertips as he cautiously held his hand above the page. The sensation was distinct, like holding a faint, steady flame without heat, a gentle, living light that breathed in defiance of every known law of thermodynamics. Stephen leaned back, the leather of his armchair creaking softly in the profound silence. The glowing tome lay open before him, its subtle light casting long, dancing shadows across the ancient shelves. For the first time in his illustrious career, his vast, encyclopedic knowledge of science, medicine, and engineering offered no answer, no equation, no peer-reviewed theory that could explain the phenomenon. His rigorous scientific method had led him to a precipice, a truth he could not quantify, yet could no longer deny. A new kind of hunger began to stir within him, a realization that the universe was far vaster, far stranger than even his formidable intellect had conceived. He would need to seek not just knowledge, but a different kind of knowledge from sources he had once, with unwavering certainty, dismissed. His eyes drifted across the library, towards the more obscure, dust-laden sections, filled with texts he had always considered archaic superstitions. The amber light pulsed rhythmically now, a soft, silent beat that seemed to resonate not in the air, but directly within the delicate sensors of his equipment, bypassing the usual auditory pathways. The holographic display, previously flickering with complex waveforms, now showed a single, clear, golden frequency, impossibly pure, untainted by interference or decay. His perfectly steady hands, still gloved, instinctively tightened their grip on the transducers, as if seeking to ground himself against this ethereal resonance. A subtle warmth, distinct from the light's gentle emanation, began to spread from the tome, not outwards, but inwards, a quiet thrum against his chest, a sensation that spoke of an ancient, sleeping power stirring. It was a perception beyond sound, beyond touch. A silent hum felt deep within his own cerebral cortex, mirroring the very tremors his instruments were designed to detect. As the silent thrum intensified, the air around the tome grew remarkably still, almost heavy, as if absorbing all ambient sound and motion. The soft light within the book's pages began to deepen in hue, transitioning from amber to a rich, molten gold that cast long, dancing shadows across the polished mahogany of his desk. With a surgeon's ingrained precision, Strange gently slid a fingertip along the spine, feeling the curious, almost organic texture of the binding, before carefully, ever so slowly, turning the first glowing page. The patterns within, previously static, now flowed and reformed, coalescing into coherent symbols that shimmered with an inner vitality, like liquid constellations captured on parchment. They were not ink, but pure, contained light, shifting and reforming under his gaze, defying all laws of material permanence. The profound stillness now enveloped the entire library, silencing the distant city hum, creating a vacuum of sound where only the book's silent thrum persisted. Dust motes, caught in the book's expanding golden aura, danced not haphazardly, but in intricate, swirling patterns that mimicked the symbols on the page, like tiny, illuminated galaxies. The ornate Gothic architecture of the room, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to press in, its shadows deepening in unnatural ways, twisting into suggestions of watchful eyes and ancient forms. Strange felt a distinct, almost physical pressure behind his own eyes, a gentle but insistent pull at the edges of his mind, urging him to comprehend, to believe, in what his instruments could not measure, and his reason could not explain. His unwavering belief in empirical data, once an unyielding foundation, now felt like a fragile barrier against a profound, unsettling truth. The symbols pulsed, a silent chorus of light that seemed to map constellations within the confines of the page. Strange, with his renowned surgeon's eyes, meticulously tracked their complex, organic motion. He leaned closer, the faint, sweet scent of ancient parchment mingling with a sharp, ozone-like tang that hadn't been there moments before. These were not mere illuminations. They were dynamic, self-generating patterns, defying the very concept of ink or pigment. His steady gaze traced a particularly intricate glyph that twisted and reformed itself, appearing to whisper unseen concepts directly into the quiet hum of his scientific mind. It was a language without sound, yet its meaning felt almost palpable. A strange, beautiful calculus unfolding before him, utterly unlike any known form of communication or energy signature he had ever encountered in his extensive research. As his fingertip, still sheathed in a thin, custom glove, hovered over a particularly vibrant cluster of symbols, the golden light intensified, not outwardly, but within the very fibers of the page. A ripple, visible only as a momentary distortion in the light's flow, spread from the point above his finger, causing the adjacent glyphs to briefly flare before settling back into their intricate dance. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible warmth against his skin, even through the glove, a warmth that seemed to emanate directly from the conceptual patterns. The air in the study, already unnaturally still, seemed to thicken further, laden with the subtle, sweet scent, making the silence feel heavy, pregnant with unspoken power. It was an experience that nudged at the edges of his scientific understanding, a physical interaction with something inherently non-physical. He instinctively pulled back his hand, a flicker of professional curiosity rather than alarm crossing his usually impassive face. This phenomenon, he mused, was certainly beyond typical luminescence or chemical reaction. He reached for a nearby penlight, a high-intensity, precision instrument, clicking it on to cast a focused beam across the pages. Yet, the symbols absorbed its stark white light without reflection, continuing to glow with their own internal golden brilliance, entirely unaffected. The penlight's beam simply vanished into the molten patterns, as if swallowed by a void, leaving no trace. It was a blatant contradiction to every optical and thermodynamic principle he knew, an elegant, impossible dance of light that defied his perfectly ordered scientific world. He pulled his gloved hand back, not in alarm, but with the measured precision of a surgeon dissecting an unknown anomaly. The warmth receded, yet the faint, sweet, almost metallic tang in the air lingered, wrapping itself around the silence. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, meticulously scoured the parchment, searching for any physical explanation. A hidden heat source, a chemical reaction, an optical illusion. His scientific mind, accustomed to finding answers in the most complex biological puzzles, refused to accept an unexplainable phenomenon. Every fiber of his being demanded a logical, provable cause, a sequence of events that adhered to the laws of physics, even if they were laws not yet fully catalogued. From a polished ebony drawer, he retrieved a sleek, compact device, a multispectral energy analyzer, custom-built for detecting the faintest bioelectrical impulses or exotic radiation. He passed it slowly, methodically, over the glowing parchment, the device's small display screen remaining stubbornly, bewilderingly blank. No known energy signature. No measurable heat beyond the ambient room temperature, no trace of exotic particles, no unusual electromagnetic fields. Yet, the subtle, silent hum persisted, a low, resonant frequency that vibrated somewhere beyond the grasp of his finest instruments, felt only as a deep, internal resonance within the stillness. As he lowered the inert analyzer, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer caught the edge of his vision. It was not on the page, but just beyond it, a distortion in the very air, like heat haze rising from an invisible source, yet without a corresponding temperature. He shifted his gaze directly, and it vanished, only to reappear when his focus drifted back to the parchment. Fleeting, elusive, it was undeniably there, a phantom ripple at the periphery of his scientific reality, an optical illusion, perhaps, or something far stranger trying to pierce through the veil of the material world, a silent invitation to a reality he hadn't known existed. Strange, his brow furrowed in concentration, activated a low-frequency sonic imager. The soft hum of its internal mechanisms, barely audible above the quiet thrum of the study. He carefully swept the device over the parchment, its holographic display remaining a flat, unresponsive gray. He tried a quantum entanglement sensor next, a prototype he'd developed for detecting minute breaches in space-time, hoping to catch some exotic particle interaction. Still nothing. The parchment lay inert, glowing softly, defying every logical inquiry, a silent rebuke to the very foundations of his understanding. The subtle sweetness in the air, however, grew fractionally stronger, a silent, pervasive scent that seemed to seep into the very fabric of the room, suggesting a presence deeper than mere paper and ink. A long, slow exhalation escaped his lips, a rare sign of concession. Strange lowered his arm, the sophisticated analyzer now inert in his hand, its purpose utterly defeated. He looked at the parchment, no longer with scientific curiosity, but with a gaze that hinted at a nascent, unsettling bewilderment. He carefully slid the parchment into a specially designed archival box, its padded interior meant to protect fragile artifacts. As the lid settled with a soft click, the faint glow from within seemed to momentarily pulse, a final, silent assertion of its otherworldly nature, before the room returned to its previous, albeit now altered, stillness. The persistent, sweet scent, though, lingered like a memory in the quiet air. He stood motionless for a moment, the hum of the city outside a distant, muted counterpoint to the quiet tension within. His mind, accustomed to rapid-fire diagnostics and definitive solutions, wrestled with the unprecedented absence of data. The parchment, now out of sight, continued to occupy a corner of his thoughts, an unsolved equation in a universe he believed he had mastered. He turned slowly, his gaze drifting to a towering bookshelf filled not with medical texts, but with volumes on ancient civilizations, forgotten languages, and obscure alchemical practices. A collection amassed more out of academic curiosity than any genuine belief in their content. For the first time, a flicker of something beyond dismissive skepticism crossed his features. The lingering, sweet fragrance of the parchment seemed to weave itself into the fibers of the vast penthouse apartment. A phantom presence that followed Strange, even as he moved from his quiet study into the sleek, minimalist living space. He paused, a hand unconsciously reaching for the lapel of his perfectly tailored suit. The crisp fabric a stark contrast to the subtle disarray within his mind. The city lights outside, usually a comforting grid of logic and order, now seemed to shimmer with a faint, almost imperceptible blur at their edges, a visual echo of the internal disruption that had taken root with the mysterious artifact. His thoughts, typically precise and surgical, felt frayed at the edges. Hours later, within the sterile luminescence of a private hospital suite, the scent seemed to thin, replaced by the faint, antiseptic tang of medical-grade cleansers. Strange stood over a patient, his gloved hands, still renowned as the finest in the world, hovering with meticulous precision. The holographic displays of various diagnostic instruments flickered with indecipherable data, showing no neurological abnormalities, no physical trauma, no known pathology. Yet the patient, a young woman, lay in a state of profound, unrousable torpor, her vital signs stable, but her mind a silent void, utterly unresponsive to every advanced medical intervention. Her skin, usually warm, felt oddly cool to his touch, a subtle, disturbing chill that seeped through the latex of his gloves, hinting at a truth far beyond the reach of conventional diagnostics. A subtle tension tightened in Strange's shoulders, a familiar precursor to surgical challenges, but this time devoid of the usual intellectual thrill. He gestured to a nurse, his voice calm but edged with an uncharacteristic sharpness, rattling off a string of increasingly obscure neurological and exotic pathogen tests. The nurse, accustomed to his exacting standards, moved with silent efficiency. Yet, as he watched the patient, a profound sense of scientific impotence began to gnaw at the edges of his arrogance. Every instrument, every scan, every chemical analysis yielded nothing, only the persistent, baffling absence of any logical cause. The soft hum of the machines around them felt like a mocking chorus, a testament to the vast, uncharted territories that his rigid scientific lens had always refused to acknowledge. his gaze, usually sharp with diagnostic certainty, now held a flicker of doubt as he meticulously reviewed the patient's intricate medical charts on the digital screen. Every parameter was within normal limits, every test negative, yet the profound stillness of the young woman on the bed persisted. He pressed his gloved palm against her forehead again, a faint shiver passing through him at the persistent, unnatural coolness that radiated despite the ambient warmth of the suite. It felt less like a lack of body heat and more like an active absorption, a subtle siphon of warmth from the world around her, defying all physiological explanation. The antiseptic scent of the room seemed to struggle against this alien chill, leaving a faint, almost metallic tang in the air. Seeking answers beyond the standard protocols, Strange had summoned Dr. Christine Palmer, her presence a familiar, comforting professional counterpoint to his own often isolated brilliance. Together, they meticulously adjusted the settings on an experimental neural imaging device, its intricate sensors gently positioned around the patient's temple. The device, designed to detect the subtlest electrical impulses, whirred with a low, almost imperceptible hum, casting a soft, blue-green glow across their focused faces. Yet even this cutting-edge technology, pushing the very boundaries of neurological understanding, yielded nothing but an unsettling flatline, a profound, unbroken silence in the vibrant symphony of a living mind. The quiet desperation in the room deepened, mirroring the void they were trying to probe. Later, alone again with the enigma, Strange found himself drawn to the patient's hand, resting so still on the crisp white sheet. It was perfectly formed, unmarred, yet he felt an almost magnetic pull, a subtle difference in the air around it. He lowered his own ungloved hand, not to perform a diagnostic test, but out of an instinct he couldn't quite articulate. As his fingers neared her skin, he perceived a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, a fleeting distortion in the light directly above her palm, like heat haze over a desert road, but cold. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving him questioning his own perception, attributing it to fatigue, or perhaps the strange, sweet scent of the parchment that still subtly clung to his senses from hours before, blurring the edges of his scientific certainty. The sterile quiet of the room deepened around the unsettling flatline. Stephen, his jaw subtly clenching, leaned closer to the intricate monitor, his perfectly steady fingers, unmarred by even a tremor, tracing the inert line. This was beyond a mere malfunction. The device was operating flawlessly, yet registering nothing. His mind, a vast library of medical knowledge and diagnostic algorithms, searched for a precedent, a rare congenital disorder, an obscure neurological phenomenon that could mimic such a profound absence of brain activity in a living subject. He moved to a secondary console, his movements precise and economical, pulling up historical medical journals, cross-referencing forgotten cases of suspended animation, cryptobiosis, anything that might offer a scientific anchor to this inexplicable void. The glow from the screens cast dancing reflections in his intense eyes, betraying the intellectual struggle beneath his calm exterior. He dismissed each possibility as quickly as it arose. None fit the unique, chilling profile of the patient. Christine, observing Stephen's relentless pursuit of a scientific explanation, felt a different kind of chill. Her gaze drifted from the monitors to the patient, then to the small, potted orchid on the windowsill. A splash of vibrant purple against the clinical white. As she watched, a single delicate bloom at the very top seemed to visibly droop, its petals curling inward as if recoiling from an unseen cold. The air, already cool, felt heavier, almost stagnant, around the young woman's bed. It wasn't merely the air conditioning. It was an emanating field, a subtle pressure that seemed to sap vitality from its immediate surroundings. Stephen, lost in a labyrinth of data, hadn't noticed, but Christine's medical intuition, less bound by the rigid logic of the quantifiable, registered a profound, disturbing imbalance in the room's very essence. Stephen finally pushed away from the console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to isolate her," he stated, his voice low but firm. "Not for contagion, but for observation under absolute environmental control. Every measurable parameter, every energy fluctuation, every particle." Christine watched the orchid, its vibrant purple petals now visibly bruised with a delicate, almost imperceptible wilting at the edges. A profound sadness settled over her as she observed its slow surrender, a quiet echo of the unseen struggle around the patient's inert form. The ambient temperature in the room, previously cool and regulated by the hospital's precise climate control, seemed to drop further. A cold that seeped into her bones rather than merely touching her skin. It wasn't the kind of chill that promised crispness, but one that felt ancient, heavy, and strangely hollow, as if drawing warmth from everything around it. A faint, almost melodic hum, too low to be mechanical, seemed to resonate from the air itself, barely touching the threshold of hearing, yet undeniable to her sensitive intuition. It was a resonance that didn't sound like energy, but rather like an absence, a quiet suction. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through the delicate filaments of Stephen's concentration. He didn't look up immediately, attributing the sudden, profound chill that pricked his skin to the usual fluctuations of hospital air conditioning. Perhaps a draft from the hallway. His steady fingers, so precise and capable, paused for a fraction of a second over the holographic display. A fleeting moment of distraction before returning to his calculations. Yet the cold persisted, deepening, wrapping around him like an unseen shroud. It was a cold that seemed to originate from within the room's core, radiating outwards from the patient's bed, not merely circulating. He unconsciously adjusted the collar of his scrubs, a small, uncharacteristic gesture of discomfort, dismissing the orchid's decline as a minor environmental variable. Stephen turned his full attention to the patient's primary physiological monitor. A new anomaly, subtle yet undeniable, had begun to paint itself across the screen, a faint, pulsing waveform overlaying the flat EEG, registering not brain activity, but a peculiar, non-biological energy signature that defied all known medical parameters. It was a pattern, rhythmic and insidious, like a slow, quiet breath of something alien, emanating directly from the patient's core. His perfectly steady hands, though unwavering, moved with a newfound, almost agitated precision, recalibrating sensors, running diagnostics, his mind frantically searching for a flaw in the machinery. A phantom signal across circuit. The air, already heavy and cold, now felt almost viscous, seeming to resist movement, and a barely perceptible distortion shimmered around the edges of the patient's bed. A soft, visual hum that made the sterile lines of the room seem to waver for a fleeting moment. He adjusted his glasses, convinced his eyes were playing tricks, a symptom of long hours and intellectual fatigue. The patient, a young woman named Alara, lay still beneath the pristine white sheets, her features tranquil, almost serene, yet unnervingly devoid of life's subtle movements. Strange leaned closer, his brow furrowing as he noticed a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer around her form. It was not the reflective sheen of perspiration or the glint of a sterile surface, but something more elusive, like heat haze seen through a distant lens. He reached out a gloved hand, not to touch, but to hover, searching for an explanation his instruments might have missed. The cold intensified, seeming to cling to the patient, radiating from her very presence. It was a cold that dulled the edges of his senses, making the bright hospital lights feel distant, muted. His fingers, trained for microscopic precision, felt an odd resistance in the air, a density that shouldn't be there, like pushing through an invisible, silken curtain. He frowned, running through every medical textbook, every obscure neurological condition he had ever studied. Nothing fit. The faint, melodic hum now seemed to pulse with a slow, deliberate rhythm, barely audible, yet unsettling in its persistence. It was a sound that seemed to resonate not from without, but from within the very fabric of the room, a silent song of wrongness. The orchid, still on the bedside table, now had a second, deeper bruise spreading across its petals, a darkening purple seeping into its vibrant life, a visible marker of the room's deepening distress. Christine, her gaze fixed on the orchid, shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. The sense of ancient, hollow cold was now palpable, no longer just a perception. She felt a subtle, almost imperceptible pressure in the air, as if the very space around them was being subtly compressed, creating a profound, heavy silence. Stephen, still focused intently on the patient, dismissed the chill, attributing it to an unknown malfunction in the hospital's climate control. His scientific mind searched for a rational explanation for the shimmer, the cold, the strange resistance. He considered subtle electromagnetic fields, unknown biological responses, perhaps even a rare form of psychological manifestation, clinging to the quantifiable, even as the inexplicable deepened around him. The cold, which had initially been a subtle discomfort, now seemed to press in on strange more acutely, a tangible weight against his skin, a pressure that bypassed the warmth of his surgical scrubs. His gloved hand, still hovering above Alara, felt a subtle vibration, not unlike a high-frequency hum, but one that resonated solely within the bone of his palm. A ghost sensation. He retracted his hand slowly, his eyes narrowing in intense concentration. Every instinct, honed by decades of pushing the boundaries of neurosurgery, screamed that something was profoundly wrong, something beyond the intricate dance of neurons and synapses. He turned to the diagnostic console, its array of screens glowing with familiar patterns of life signs, stable, if unnaturally so. Yet, the persistent cold and the unseen resistance in the air persisted, defying every reading. The bioenergetic scan, usually a cascade of vibrant, detailed readouts, registered nothing but a flat, unchanging baseline. Strange watched, perplexed, as the holographic display remained stubbornly blank, devoid of any abnormal energy signatures or cellular distortions that might explain the profound cold or the ethereal hum. It was as if Alara's body, despite the palpable anomalies around it, was scientifically inert, a perfect void within the scanning spectrum. His frustration, a rare and unwelcome visitor in his meticulously ordered world, began to simmer beneath his calm exterior. He walked around the bed, his gaze sweeping across the room, searching for any other overlooked detail. His eyes landed on the orchid again, its petals now bearing an even wider stain of dark purple, a stark, morbid contrast to its previous vibrant hue. Strange reached out again, this time towards the orchid, his gloved fingertips approaching the strange, shimmering distortion around its blighted petals. As his hand drew near, the cold intensified dramatically. A sudden drop in temperature that made his breath visible for a fleeting moment in the otherwise warm hospital room. The melodic hum, which had been a distant thrum, now pulsed with a low, resonant frequency against his eardrums, feeling less like a sound and more like an internal pressure. And then, as his fingers were mere millimeters from the flower, the distortion rippled, a visible wave moving through the air, pushing his hand back with an unseen force. There was no impact, no gust of wind, just a gentle, firm displacement, as if an invisible, silken wall had manifested in the air, guarding the wilting blossom. His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing his usual analytical composure. The anomaly of the orchid, now a deep, almost bruised purple, pulled Strange's gaze back, a silent challenge to his ordered world. He walked towards it, his steps measured and deliberate, the only sound the soft brush of his scrubs as he neared the plant, a faint, metallic tang, like distant ozone, became discernible beneath the antiseptic crispness of the operating room. It was a scent that whispered of storm and raw energy, utterly out of place here. He reached out, his gloved fingers hovering inches from the deepest purple bloom, feeling a tangible cold emanating from its velvety surface, colder even than the ambient chill that permeated the room. Beneath the smooth latex, a subtle prickling sensation began to spread across his fingertips, a faint, almost electrical buzz that mirrored the phantom hum in his palm. Determined to find a tangible explanation, Strange retreated to the diagnostic console once more, dismissing the bizarre sensory inputs as potential neurological fatigue from the prolonged stress. He activated a rarely used bioluminescence scanner, a device designed to detect minute cellular energy emissions, often used in cutting-edge research to observe the faintest biological reactions. If the orchid was changing, if Alara was a locus of some unseen alteration, this scanner would surely pick up a unique spectral signature. He ran the scanner over the patient, then over the orchid, the blue-green light washing over the deepened purple petals. Yet the display remained stubbornly inert, a flat, unchanging black screen offering no data, no flicker, no trace of the profound energetic shift he felt pressing in around him. The silence of the machine was louder than any alarm, a testament to an impossible void where there should have been a vibrant, complex tapestry of bioenergetic activity. His frustration, though still present, was slowly being overtaken by a profound, chilling sense of the unknown, a creeping realization that the rules he lived by were beginning to fray at the edges. The silence from the machine was a defiance, a stark refusal to engage with the reality his own senses were screaming about. In that quiet room, surrounded by the pinnacle of human diagnostic technology, Stephen Strange felt a profound and unsettling obsolescence. His frustration cooled, replaced by a quiet, consuming curiosity that bordered on the obsessive. This was not a failure of equipment. It was a failure of the known universe to adhere to its own rules. He powered down the scanner. The faint hum of its cooling fans, the only sound besides the rhythmic sigh of Alara's ventilator. He turned back to the bedside. As his fingertips drew near, the buzzing sensation returned, but without the dulling filter of the glove. It was sharper, more articulate. It was not a simple vibration, but a complex, shifting pattern, like a current of information flowing just beneath his skin, written in a language of pure sensation. He let the tip of his index finger brush against a petal. The cold was shocking, not the wet chill of ice, but a dry, absolute cold that seemed to pull the warmth directly from his flesh. The velvety texture of the bloom felt utterly alien. For a moment, he thought he saw the ambient light in the room dim slightly, as if the flower were a tiny pinprick of night, drawing the world into itself. He sank into his chair, the supple leather creaking softly. The view of the city, usually a testament to a world built on logic and ambition, offered no comfort tonight. The rain streaked down the glass, blurring the lights into long, melancholic trails of amber and white. He powered on his desktop, its soft chime a familiar note of order in his growing disquiet. He bypassed his medical databases and surgical schedules, navigating instead to a heavily encrypted, firewalled partition of his personal drive. It was a place he rarely visited, a private collection he called his cabinet of impossibilities. Here, he archived every case that had ever stumped him or his colleagues, anomalous recoveries, phantom ailments, reports of biological phenomena that defied every known law. The inexplicable cold from the petal seemed to seep deeper than mere flesh, settling into his bones. He withdrew his hand, a strange, phantom ache now pulsing faintly in his fingertips, a counterpoint to the buzzing. His gaze sharpened, analytical despite the unease. He retrieved a small medical spectroscope from his kit, a device designed to analyze light signatures for diagnostic purposes. As he brought its lens close to the peculiar bloom, expecting a familiar spectrum, the digital readout remained stubbornly blank, displaying only an erratic error message. The ambient light around the flower, which had merely dimmed before, now seemed to gather and concentrate into its velvet folds, creating a deeper, more pronounced pool of shadow directly above it. A tiny void in the otherwise softly lit room. The spectroscope's silence was a jarring discord in his scientific symphony. He laid it aside, his mind already racing through other potential explanations, other tools. He picked up a precision infrared thermometer, its laser pointer a tiny red dot against the deep velvet of the petal. The readout flashed, not with a temperature, but with a series of rapidly cycling symbols, and then an abrupt, impossible negative value that flickered out, leaving the screen dark. The cold radiating from the flower was now palpable in the immediate air around it. A small, distinct pocket of frigid stillness that gently pushed against the warmth of the room. A subtle, creeping expansion of its unnatural influence. The gentle hum of Alara's ventilator seemed to echo the silent defiance of the phenomenon. Stephen's brow furrowed, not in anger, but in the intense concentration of a mind confronted with a novel, profound puzzle. This was no malfunction of instruments. This was a fundamental breach of physical law. He leaned closer to the flower, the abnormal cold raising goosebumps on his forearms, yet he ignored it. He studied the intricate, dark veins of the petals, tracing their alien patterns with his gaze. He noticed a faint, almost imperceptible pulsation within the deepest part of the bloom, a slow, rhythmic ebb and flow of the dimming light that seemed to mirror, ever so slightly, the gentle, shallow breaths of Alara in her bed. It was a connection, undeniable and chilling, suggesting the flower was not merely a passive anomaly, but an active participant in her strange ailment. Strange's brow furrowed, a familiar crease of intense concentration deepening between his eyes. He reached for a microlaser spectrometer, a tool designed for subatomic analysis. Its delicate optics, usually capable of discerning the most minute, energetic signatures. He directed its focused beam at the petal. The bloom, however, absorbed the laser light without reflection, without registering any energy signature, as if the photons simply vanished into its surface, leaving no trace. The instrument's display remained a dark, unresponsive mirror. The impossible cold in the air around the flower now seemed to hum with a subtle, almost imperceptible resonance. A low, steady thrum that bypassed sound and registered instead as a pressure against his eardrums. A sigh, almost imperceptible, escaped his lips, a rare admission of scientific impasse. He laid the spectrometer down with a precision born of years in the operating theater, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He then retrieved a small, sterile scalpel, its blade gleaming faintly under the soft room light, contemplating a minuscule tissue sample. But as his hand, steady and unmarred, hovered inches from the petal. A faint, almost invisible shimmer emanated from the bloom's surface. A brief, silent pulse of energy that felt more like a warning than a physical barrier. He paused, his intuition, usually a secondary tool to his intellect, now subtly stirring a quiet caution. The shadows above the flower deepened further, creating a small, intensely dark sphere of emptiness that seemed to drink the light. He decided against the invasive action for now. The peculiar bloom felt less like a biological specimen and more like a sealed enigma defying physical manipulation. He gently backed away, his gaze still fixed on the flower, a new kind of quiet determination settling in his posture. He moved towards his medical bag, not for another instrument, but for a worn, leather-bound journal, one filled with his own meticulous notes on rare medical anomalies, hoping for a forgotten entry, an obscure case study that might even remotely echo this impossible phenomenon. The air in the room, once comfortably warm, now carried a distinct, lingering chill, a persistent whisper of the flower's unnatural presence. Even at a distance, the subtle pulse from the petal resonated not as a shock, but as a deep, primal thrum against the very fabric of his scientific certainty. Stephen's hand, so accustomed to the delicate dance of life and death, retracted almost imperceptibly, not in fear, but in a rare recognition of something utterly alien to his domain of rational thought. The scalpel, still gleaming, was gently set back into its sterile tray, its purpose momentarily obsolete. The dark sphere of emptiness above the bloom seemed to drink the ambient light, not merely reflecting shadow, but embodying an absence, a void that pulled at the edges of the room's otherwise stable reality. He observed the phenomenon with a clinician's unwavering gaze, seeking patterns, seeking anomalies that could be quantified, categorized, understood. Yet there were none. A soft, almost imperceptible hum now seemed to emanate not from the flower itself, but from the very air around it, a silent frequency that resonated deep within Stephen's bones. He removed the goggles, the stark reality of the flower's visual stillness contrasting sharply with the internal pressure he felt. He moved away from the sterile stainless steel table, opting for a nearby holographic diagnostic station. With a subtle gesture of his unmarred hands, he activated the display, calling up schematics of molecular structures, energy field simulations, and quantum entanglement theories. He began to cross-reference known exotic matter, dark energy profiles, and even theoretical physics models, feeding the bloom's observed properties into the system. Each query met with a blank. The lab, usually a symphony of precise, controlled processes, now felt subtly off-key, like a perfectly tuned instrument experiencing a gradual, unexplainable drift. Stephen, ever the meticulous observer, noted the minute fluctuations in the ambient air pressure, the faint, almost melodic resonance that seemed to vibrate directly in the space behind his eyes. It was a sensation that transcended mere physical data, touching instead upon a deeper, more intuitive understanding of imbalance. He returned to the flower, circling it slowly, his gaze sweeping over every surface, every shadow. The dark sphere of emptiness above it had intensified, becoming a point of absolute void, a tiny pinprick of pure blackness that seemed to swallow even the most aggressive photons. It wasn't merely shadow. It was a hungry, silent maw. Stephen's precise mind, usually so quick to find order, met only a disquieting vacuum. The holographic projections shimmered, displaying only null responses, unknown parameters, or data insufficient. A faint tremor, almost imperceptible, passed through the polished metal frame of the diagnostic station, a sympathetic vibration to the silent hum emanating from the flower. He leaned back, his gaze lingering on the dark sphere above the bloom. His medical acumen, his entire worldview built on measurable facts, found no purchase here. A single, almost imperceptible line formed between his brows, a rare crack in his usual unflappable confidence. He reached out, not to touch the flower, but to trace a complex, abstract equation in the air with a fingertip, a silent attempt to force a theoretical framework onto the inexplicable. The sterile air of the lab, usually so predictable, now carried a subtle, almost metallic scent, like ozone after a distant storm. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was alien, another uninvited guest in his perfectly controlled environment. He turned from the holographic display, his hands, still perfectly steady, moving to a simple, unadorned magnifying glass on a nearby work surface. He picked it up, abandoning the high-tech for the purely optical, drawing closer to the peculiar bloom. His breath was slow, even, a surgeon's steady rhythm, as he peered through the lens, searching for microfractures in the petal structure, any physical anomaly that might betray its impossible nature. The darkness above the flower seemed to pulse, a soft, inward beat, echoing the silence of his fruitless queries. The microscopic world revealed nothing but perfection. Each petal of the bloom, under the magnifying glass, displayed an impossibly smooth surface, an intricate cellular structure that defied known botany, yet showed no blemish, no tear, no disease. It was as if carved from a single, flawless entity, immune to the decay and imperfections inherent in all biological life Stephen had ever encountered. soft, inward pulse above the flower seemed to deepen, a silent resonance that hummed only in the back of his mind. A faint pressure behind his eyes. He lowered the magnifying glass, his gaze drawn once more to the inky darkness above, sensing a depth that optics could not penetrate, a vastness contained within a small, laboratory-bound sphere. The metallic scent in the air, previously subtle, now seemed to coalesce, almost tangible, as if the room itself was holding its breath. A flicker, then a gentle undulation, passed through the very air around the dark sphere. It wasn't a visible distortion, but rather an impression, like the shimmer above hot asphalt on a summer day. Only colder, deeper. Strange reached out, his unbroken hand hovering inches from the sphere, feeling an odd coolness radiating from it, a spatial anomaly that tickled the fine hairs on his arm. His surgeon's mind, so accustomed to the predictable responses of flesh and bone, grappled with this non-physical sensation. He retracted his hand slowly, his perfectly steady fingers flexing, an unconscious act of reassessment. The air in the lab grew heavy, not stifling, but ponderous, as if the space itself was trying to process the impossible presence before them. The null responses on the holographic displays now seemed less like a system error and more like a deliberate, impenetrable silence. He stepped back from the station, his analytical mind attempting to categorize the uncategorizable. The scent intensified, becoming almost sweet, like decaying petals mixed with ozone. Yet, there was no decay visible on the flawless bloom. He ran a hand through his impeccably styled hair, a rare gesture of perplexed concentration. The silence of the lab, usually a comforting backdrop to his focused work, now felt profound, pregnant with an unspoken truth. This wasn't a patient to be diagnosed, nor a phenomenon to be dissected under a microscope. This was an affront to his entire worldview, a whispered question that demanded an answer far beyond the confines of his vast medical knowledge. He looked at his hands, then at the pulsating darkness, a flicker of something akin to awe, or perhaps alarm, briefly crossing his unyielding features. The null readings on his holographic display were not merely an absence of data. They were an active negation, a perfect zero that implied a barrier, not a void. Stephen, ever the pragmatic scientist, retrieved a precision laser interferometer from its sterile enclosure. His movements were fluid, economical, each motion honed by countless hours of delicate surgery. He calibrated the instrument with practiced ease, his gaze unwavering as he aimed the faint red beam towards the shimmering area around the dark sphere. The laser, designed to detect minute shifts in space-time, should have shown something, even ambient microvibrations. Instead, the display remained stubbornly blank, a flat, unchanging line. Frustration, a rare guest in Strange's meticulously controlled emotional landscape, began to stir. He repositioned the interferometer, recalibrating it with even greater care, ensuring no environmental factor could possibly interfere. He even checked the lab's atmospheric controls, verifying the temperature and pressure were perfectly stable. Yet, the result remained the same, an absolute, unyielding null. He glanced at the perfect bloom, still contained within its observation sphere beside the larger dark one. It pulsed with that same soft, inward rhythm, utterly unaffected by the strange anti-field radiating from its neighbor, dismissing the tremor as perhaps psychosomatic, a trick of the mind reacting to the baffling data. Strange turned to his extensive data archives. He began cross-referencing exotic energy signatures, theoretical physics anomalies, even obscure medical conditions that might somehow manifest such an effect on external sensors. His fingers, long and nimble, danced across the holographic interface, pulling up complex equations and esoteric research papers. Each search yielded nothing, no known phenomenon that matched the complete absence of measurable interaction, combined with the palpable, yet unquantifiable, presence he felt. The metallic tang in the air deepened, becoming sharper, almost metallic, as if the very atoms of the lab were reorganizing themselves around the inert, yet profoundly active sphere. The silence of the instruments became an echoing pronouncement of the impossible, pushing against the rigid boundaries of everything Stephen Strange believed to be true. Stephen's mind, a finely tuned instrument of deduction, refused to accept a void where data should be. If traditional methods failed, an unconventional approach was warranted. A foray into the theoretical, he moved with practiced grace to a sterile, vibration-dampened cart, his movements precise and deliberate, selecting a delicate quantum entanglement sensor. This sophisticated device, usually reserved for the most esoteric theoretical physics experiments, was designed to detect minute disruptions in the very fabric of reality itself, sensitive to ripples beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. Its crystalline lattice glowed with a faint, internal cerulean light as he activated it. A soft, almost inaudible hum emanating from its core, a sound lost in the vast quiet of the lab. His perfectly steady hands celebrated the world over for their surgical prowess, carefully positioned the sensor less than a millimeter from the dark sphere's unyielding surface. With a slow, almost imperceptible sigh that barely disturbed the quiet air, Stephen carefully retracted the quantum sensor. The utter lack of any measurable interaction was not just baffling, it was profoundly unsettling to a mind rigorously trained to find answers within the observable universe. He consciously shifted his focus, letting his gaze drift away from the unyielding darkness and towards the companion sphere, where the perfect bloom resided within its own transparent containment. The bloom pulsed gently, a soft, deep amber light emanating from its core, a beacon of ethereal warmth against the lab's cool, clinical precision. It seemed to breathe, a quiet, rhythmic ebb and flow that offered a soothing counterpoint to the enigma beside it, a silent symphony of impossible biology. He leaned closer to the bloom's sphere, his perfect eyes meticulously scanning its intricate, yet utterly alien structure. Stephen pushed back from the observation table. The polished, dark floor of the lab, reflecting the soft glow of his specialized equipment like a distorted galaxy, each light a distant, unread star. He crossed the expansive, meticulously organized space, the silence amplifying the soft, almost reverent click of his bespoke shoes against the polished surface. He walked deliberately towards the reinforced panoramic window that overlooked a sleeping New York City, its myriad lights twinkling like distant, indifferent stars against the deep, velvet blackness of the night sky. He stood there for a long moment, hands clasped loosely behind his back, his posture rigid but thoughtful, his reflection a stoic silhouette against the urban tapestry. His perspective was subtly, yet profoundly, shifting. The dark sphere and the perfect bloom were no longer just anomalies to be measured and categorized by known science. They were becoming harbingers, silent sentinels of a reality far more expansive and less predictable than his rigorously scientific dogma had ever allowed. He leaned closer to the bloom sphere, his perfect eyes meticulously scanning its intricate, yet utterly alien structure. Every vein, every translucent petal, every minute filament pulsed with an internal luminescence, a slow, gentle heartbeat of light. It defied categorization, pushing past the boundaries of anything he had ever dissected, analyzed, or even imagined within the confines of Earth's known flora. There were no visible stomata, no root system, no obvious means of nutrient absorption or waste expulsion. Yet it lived, thrived, and exuded a soft warmth that radiated faintly even through its robust containment. His mind, a finely tuned instrument of logic and deduction, began to process an endless stream of data, cataloging the impossible. The crystalline perfection of its form, the impossible light within, the rhythmic pulse, each element was a quiet defiance of conventional biology, a beautiful, serene anomaly. As his presence lingered, a subtle shift occurred within the bloom. Its rhythmic pulse, Initially a steady, almost predictable cadence began to subtly alter, responding to the unseen currents of his focused concentration. The deep amber light within intensified by the slightest margin. A warm, almost imperceptible breath of energy exhaling from its core. It was not a violent reaction, nor a sudden jolt, but a slow, gentle acknowledgement, like a deep-sea anemone sensing a change in the water pressure. A faint, almost melodic hum, too low for the ear, but felt more in the quiet air of the lab, seemed to emanate from the sphere. A sympathetic vibration to the silent intensity of Strange's mind. His scientific instruments, calibrated for specific wavelengths and known energies, remained stoically unresponsive. Yet Stephen felt it, a faint, almost tactile brush against his awareness, a whisper from something fundamentally alive and utterly unknown. Stephen Strange, the man who had always prided himself on dissecting reality to its finest components, found himself at an impasse. His prodigious intellect, usually so adept at formulating hypotheses and predicting outcomes, struggled to categorize this perfect bloom. Every internal framework, every known law of physics, biology, and chemistry seemed to recoil from its very existence. It was an elegant defiance, a living paradox contained within a sphere, humming softly in the hushed expanse of his private sanctuary. He instinctively reached for his mental database of rare diseases, exotic botanicals, even theoretical constructs of alien life, but none offered even a remote correlation. This wasn't just a new species. It was a new kind of existence. A faint frown, a rare visitor to his usually placid, confident features, briefly